Okay, so let's start first. I would like for your team, I know you're working with groups of children, several children, but I want you to focus in on a child that you feel has the most impact into their sensory system. Okay? Yes, I want you to focus in on one child right now, and I want you as a team to try to agree on who that child would be that has the most sensory impact. Okay? Once you decide on that person, that child, I want you to think about, is there anything going on tactily with this child? On one side of the sheet, if you could make a T chart, right? I want you to write what you're seeing tactily with this child. It can be hyper or hyposensitivity. Yes, you guys can move. Get up and move and go to the wall. I'm sure you guys are tired of sitting.
Okay, everybody. Can we have your attention for just a minute? Sorry. Visual system. There's also hyper and hypo for visual system dysfunction. Go ahead.
So a child may dislike dark or bright lights. That could be something. Might be frightened by light or something that comes in quickly. May look down a lot to try to block out excessive stimuli. Sometimes they may cover their eyes or cover like they have a baseball cap on. Those could also be components of hypersensitivity. Too much is coming in. I don't know how to handle that. Hypo is they're staring at the light. They're getting this far away from the light, okay? They're not getting the input that they need. They might stare intensively at objects or things. They might prefer things like lines, and they may actually like to run their eye along a lined surface. They might be fascinated by shadows and reflections. And I know that I think I've given this example to you before, but I had a child who was obsessed, needed that visual input with lines. Like you could not wear a striped shirt or that child was like right up on you. Okay, just trying to get that. He would put his eyes down on surfaces like this just to see the differences there. So think about the visual system of the child that the same child that you're working with. Is there any impact there, either hyper or hyposensitive? Go. Same child. Okay, some of you guys are running out of space, so that tells me that you've got quite a few things going on. Can you direct your attention back up here very quickly? Let's take a look at auditory when we look at hypersensitivity, kind of unable to filter out noises. So if there's anything going on in the environment, everything is going on in the environment for the child. They may avoid sounds and noises, hate being in crowds. Storms may freak them out from the noise of the storms. It makes self-care tasks difficult. Even flushing the toilet for a child like this can be difficult because of the auditory hypersensitivity. Showering can be difficult. Different things like that because of that input. And may use their own voice to drown out the environmental noise. So you may hear some humming.
I know that this may seem counterintuitive, that we are talking about hypersensitivities of the auditory system in a classroom or a room full of people who work with deaf and hard of hearing students. But if any of you have ever seen or worked with a child whose cochlear implant sensitivity maybe needs to be turned down, audiologists don't necessarily like to have that conversation. It's your job to have that conversation. Sometimes it's too much and you have to work on some desensitization to auditory oversensitivities. So I know that that may seem counterintuitive, but loud noises, compression's only going to do so much, guys, for hearing aids or cochlear implants. And sometimes compression's still set outside of their comfort zone sensory-wise. So just keep in mind that while that may seem counterintuitive, it is very, very possible. I mean, I taught in the autism clinic with deaf kids with autism, and I can tell you the auditory hypersensitivity is definitely an issue that we worked with a long time to get kids back to typical registration of their auditory system with their devices. So just feel free to go down this weird road that people are going to tell you not to go down. We're asking you to go down it, okay?
So this is Nick over here on the right, and Nick was very hypersensitive to sounds, so much so that we would have our summer camp in a junior high building, and from one summer to the next they had to change out the cooling system on the roof. You know how big those things are, they all have to crane those things in. It had a vibration to it, so he would not eat in the lunchroom. Do you know how long it took us to figure out what was going on? Because we just thought he didn't want to be with his peers. We thought he didn't want to eat what was sent in his lunchbox. We thought that it looked like pure behavior. He would literally yell not to go in there. And we finally figured it out, that it was the vibration from the new air conditioning system that they put in. Trial and error. So at first he ate in his classroom, so we knew it wasn't going to be a food thing. Then we slowly moved the desk in closer, and then as everybody's like, what is going on? What's different? And then I think it was one of the janitors that told us that they had put a new system in. And then we all kind of walked in there one morning before all the kids arrived, and you could definitely hear it. But I think he thought it was going to come through onto his head. I'm not quite sure. But so here he is. He's able to go in, but he had to have the noise cancellation headphones on. And then he still applied pressure to them. Okay, so auditory hyposensitivity, seeking noisy environments, liking to make their own noise in the environment, making loud rhythmic noises, all kinds of things. Okay, so hit it on auditory. Do you have anything going on? Hyper or hypo?
We have a lot of implant and hearing aid throwers in here, I can tell right now, right? And so that could be a physical, tactile piece, or that could be auditory, and you may not know, and it may take that trial and error. So I can tell right now, I'm seeing a lot of people signing that at me. So go.
I know you guys are all engaged talking about your students right now, but if you could look up here very quickly. My husband would say this is the smell of money because he grew up on a hog farm. I would not say that that is the smell of money. Okay, let's look at some hypersensitivities to olfactory. They may find an environment overpowering. Smells, lunchrooms. You can tell when somebody's cutting a fruit, or like I can tell if somebody's eating an orange like 3 offices away, right? So smell can be overpowering. They may show extreme aversive reactions to odors and substances. Okay? So they may just want to get out of the environment. And they will not, these are the kids that probably will not go in to a bathroom to use the toilet. Okay? Even if you walk in and you think it's clean, it looks fine, this child is probably going to smell the soap. If it's a male, they're going to smell the urinal cakes. Everything is going to flood in for this child. So you could even have some issues toileting. Hyposensitive is they may smell things obsessively, and they may seek strong odors. Okay? Go. Go ahead. Did you?
I was just going to say that Stacy has worked with kids with autism for years, so she knows that there are only 2 perfumes that she can wear, right? Because I taught kids with autism for years, and I just stopped wearing perfume because they're hypersensitive. Stacy wears only 2 kinds, and they have chocolate. There's a chocolate base, so they actually like those. But it took a lot of trial and error to find something that wasn't aversive to students with autism. So things like that as well. If somebody walks in or walks by and has a scent like a perfume or a cologne, or God forbid you teach junior high and they're living in the Axe world, then think about things like that as well.
Okay, let's move on. Hypersensitive, when we're looking at our taste, this could be your very poor eater, okay? Maybe they have limited foods that they will even try. They may use the tip of their tongue for eating. They may gag or vomit easily, or they may regurgitate, okay? So that's hypersensitivity. There's too much. And Christy, in the past, Borders has done a really good job about talking about kind of like the explosion in the mouth that can occur gustatorially when a child is eating something. It's like they're feeling everything.
Oh, when they're an overstuffer? The thing that you guys need to think about, and I talk with my college students about this a lot, is gustatory hypersensitivity and hyposensitivity you can also see in speech patterns. So a kid who is hypersensitive in their mouth is a kid who feels every tooth all day long. Okay, these kids don't like to talk. They don't like to move their mouth. They can feel their tongue on the inside of their teeth. They can feel every tooth on the inside of their lips. That, if you just envision that for 2 seconds, oh my goodness, bless their hearts, right? Hyposensitivity, you also see impact with speech. So this is one of those things that I always feel like a total outsider in deaf education, especially as one who was trained both ASL and oral, that I can tell you that some kids are resistant to oral education not because it's not the right mode for them, but because they have comorbid conditions that are making them either hypo or hypersensitive in their mouth. If you can't feel where your tongue tip is, right, you're hyposensitive. You cannot feel where your tongue is in your mouth. Good luck learning to make a T sound, right? And so some of this really, you may be seeing some of these things in terms of the speech sound that you know that they should be making doesn't make any sense. Why? But they're all in the same place. They're all velar sounds. Well, that might be this. Okay, so I'm going to push you down a kind of non-intuitive road here, but that's kind of what that's like. You also have overstuffers. Overstuffers are hyposensitive. They're not getting sensation unless those cheeks are chipmunked, right? So think about things like that as well. It's not only taste in gustatory, it's also that mouth sensitivity. And I think so often we think taste, these are your spicy hot Cheeto kids. Well, taste is one piece of it. Mouth sensitivity is a whole other side of this that isn't often talked about, okay?
How about 2 minutes, because we're starting. I want to get through a couple more of these, and I think lunch is at 12:15. Are you guys hungry yet?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's look at proprioceptive. So hypersensitivity, you might see the child place their body in odd positions. This is Sam. I don't know if he could become more of a pretzel. But he was in those odd positions, so he's getting a couple of different types of input. He's also getting the warmth because that day the sun was shining on the sidewalk, and the sidewalk was actually warm, so he was putting his cheek and his face down on the sidewalk. So you may see them put their bodies may be in strange positions. They may turn their whole body when looking, okay? Difficulty manipulating small objects. Now let's look at hypo. These are going to be your low muscle tone kids, kind of rubbery. They're never going to sit like up, okay? A lack of awareness of their body in space, completely lack. You know, they're going to run into things. They might have a tendency to fall. They may rock to get some input, okay? Any proprioceptive issues with the children? You guys have proprioceptive issues with your child. You have both? Okay, that's fine. We have not gone over vestibular, correct? Okay. So let's look at hypersensitivity vestibular-wise. We can have fearful reactions to just regular movement activities. Difficulty walking, crawling over uneven or unstable surfaces. I've actually had children walk on a sidewalk and stop before the grass because they almost had to prepare themselves for the different type of surface they were walking on. Okay? Dislikes being upside down, becomes anxious or distressed if somebody picks them up and their feet leave the ground. So those are some things that you can see. For hyposensitive, they enjoy the swings. You can wind them up and just let them twist nonstop. They like to spin, run around, kind of really engage. These are your rocking children that get that input through that. This group over here showed me a video, and boy, is this kid really involved here. He could not sit to save his life. I mean, he was all over the place. So that's, I think he is massively seeking in that area. So stand up. Let's go ahead and move over and write down any type of vestibular dysfunction that you think that you're seeing, whether it's hyper or hyposensitive. Okay. On your boards now, if you want to have a seat for a minute, we can do that. But we are gonna move into an intervention kind of stage. But I like this visual representation because this should actually be a similar visual representation that you have created for the student that you're working with. If you can read this, it says, I have trouble focusing and concentrating. I chew on everything. I like to sit with my legs in the V position. I hate being tickled or cuddled. So you should have a good idea kind of your student by kind of looking at their sensory components, but by looking across those areas. And as I come down here and look, only because I've seen, this is the video child right here. I wish we had permission to like really show it everywhere, but they showed me a video earlier of this child. I mean, he can't sit still. I mean, his legs are up, he's down, he's doing stomping on the ground, all while he's eating his lunch. That it's just coming in from somewhere, right? He is so involved sensory-wise. He just cannot get it together. I'm surprised he's even able to eat, actually. So as I look at that, he's also a stripper. He puts his hands in his pants. He likes rough and tumble, deep pressure. He breaks things. Does he break the crayons when he's writing with them or because he's mad?
I don't think he's mad. I think he's got this thing in his hand and he can break it.
Okay,
So he breaks it.
so I'm just, very good. Visual, no eye contact with people or items. Like he is all over the place and not anything that's right here. He does the blinking and staring off that we talked about earlier. Staring off always bothers me a little bit. Does that bother you guys? I always tendency to worry about some seizure things there. He eats paper clips. That's dangerous. Tries. So not. So he's not swallowing at all. They got it out. Okay, good. Proprioceptive, he puts his body in weird positions. He's unaware of his body in space. He's stomping he does that stomp. His hands are behind his back sometimes, so he's getting that pressure and stretch in the front. His real stiff body, the blinking. And then we have down below covering ears and laughter. That's the I'm not quite sure where it fits components. So I forgot to say swinging, sudden movements, spinning, and rocking. Okay. Where do you start? And so this is actually a perfect child to work with, okay? Because you're like, I don't even know where to begin. So I would have to ask you guys, what is impacting him the most right now from gaining or accessing information in the environment? What's the thing that's just the most interrupting?
For him or for the class and the teacher?
It's for his learning. So I'm going to say him.
I'd say the eye contact at this point, like his inability to sustain attention because he is implanted, he's had implants for 18 months.
Eye contact, she's saying.
Yeah, so I would say eye contact right at this point because he has an inability to sustain attention to the sign. He is implanted, but he's had the implants for 18 months, and the hospital is saying he has made like Zippo auditory progress. He takes them off, and he'll hand them nicely to you. I mean, we've at least gotten that far that he doesn't, throw them wherever he is. He will walk over and give them to you, but he doesn't keep them on. So, like, the auditory piece isn't, benefiting him significantly now.
Okay, so it's the visual. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be eye contact, but it would be like localizing visually towards something that's in front of him that you want him to attend to. Are you sure he's not attending but using all peripheral vision to do it?
He might be. There are some times that you can, he's very motivated by very tiny little gummy bears. So you can hold that gummy bear in front of you, and he'll look at you, and you can sign to him, and he'll occasionally copy the sign, after you model, and, he really likes those gummy bears.
If I'm standing over here and he's doing his regular thing, and I model a sign, and I request that he won't, okay. So that would probably tell me he's not accessing a ton through his.
Well, and there's a lot of the, he'll sit there, but it's almost like that I'm looking right through you kind of thing. His eyes may be in the right spot, but they're not really looking.
Right. Okay.
If that makes sense. Does he have an ocular report? As far as we know, his vision is fine. He did like the typical screening stuff to get into the district, but.
Anybody else have any questions about this young one?
What about using pictures with the sign? I've done that with a student of mine, and she's now graduating from verbal, who was approved in play.
Do you mean like a photograph of the object we want him to sign, or like a picture, like a two-dimensional picture of like hands making a sign?
No, a picture of the object.
Yeah, so we've actually tried to use just the actual object because we don't think he's making the connection to pictures. He does have a visual picture schedule that they're using with him, and we're hopefully trying to start to use that as a transition. So instead of just moving it down, we want him to to take the blocks and move them to the block center to know that's where he's going next.
So what I think we see here is that you're definitely going to want to focus in on that visual component first, because that is impacting his ability to get most of the information in. There's several things that you're going to have to do in order to really impact the visual component, right? So the things that she talked about, like holding the gummy bear here and signing, because that's a motivator, that's a reinforcer, he's looking. And that's, if I have a child with severe autism, that's the exact same way I would try to do it. You don't necessarily have to gain the direct eye contact, but if you can get them to localize in an area, then that's going to be the best thing. So have you done a reinforcement assessment with him?
He really likes gummy bears.
He really likes gummy bears. He's going to have a belly full of gummy bears.
He likes goldfish crackers too.
Okay. So I'm thinking if he's blanking, staring off, not looking, okay? So is he hypo or hyper? That's hard to determine, isn't it? Because it could go either way. Okay, so how could we determine that? If he's staring off.
Well, and I think at times, like, you know, if you watch the different videos of him, at times he's very just calm and almost like spaced out and just not even there. And, you know, he'll just sit and you can raise his hand and it'll flop right back down. And then, like, other times he's, you know, the flailing wild. No, he's 4. He's 4.
And not medicated in any way. So you were wondering if possibly the medication had an impact on his... Right. So I'm thinking what I would probably do is to do some tests so I could determine whether or not it's hypo or hyper, since both of these can kind of go both ways. And one of the things that I might do is get like light up toys, light up things to see if he will visually look at things that are lighting up. Something beyond edible. I mean, you're going to use the edible definitely as a form of reinforcement for attending to things. But I'm just wondering what type of, because you want to keep him regulated, right? So if he's hypo, he's not taking it in. If he's hyper, he's not taking it in. So we need to keep him at a level so we can get him to attend. So that's probably one of the first things I would do. Put some lights in front of him. See what it does. I know I used to have like this thing that I could turn on. It looked like a microphone, and it would spin. It almost looked like electricity in it to see if he actually goes for that, wants that input, or if he turns away from it. Okay? But I do think you're going to have to work on that. I would probably take a very behavioral approach like you're doing. I liked when you said, are you using pictures or anything? I think possibly if he's not looking, you're not getting him to visualize on the sign, to imitate those signs, that you may want to choose and work with a different type of a communication system with him, having it be something that he initiates, like with the picture exchange communication system. Because you can always embed sign after the fact. So if you can get some basic communication in place with him, then you can pair that sign. But I would do it in a very traditional manner where you're, where you're teaching the child to initiate, and if you need to, you can have a supporter behind them doing some not hand over hand, but helping him move toward the icon and so on. So those are a few things that I would probably start off with. Do you guys have anything to add?
Well, the only other thing, and Stacy and I laugh because we always say that give us anything. The first question we have is physiological. So my first question, and I think I've heard several people going, I would definitely want some sort of neurological evaluation on that little guy. I would be very concerned about some seizure activity happening just based on the general, what you guys are saying. So first thought, physiological. I always go there first.
We recommended at parent conferences, but we can only recommend so much before we're stuck paying.
Right. No, I understand, but definitely physiological first. I mean, those sound like very classic physiological things, and so even if you put the best interventions in place, if he's seizing in and out, then it's not going to be effective. Secondly, I absolutely concur with the idea of going toward visual communication for him in terms of PECs, concrete, visual, because he's not accessing his environment visually. So, yeah, that's where I would go.
So a couple of things. Auditory, I may not worry about at this point. The gustatory, I wouldn't probably worry about at this point. But when I looked at the tactile and the proprioceptive, I would make sure that he kind of has some breaks to have some of that type of input. Like sitting in that chair, you know, he was swinging his legs. I mean, he was running as fast as he could sitting in a chair. He was moving all over the place. He was stiff-legging it. You know, so I might even think of different chair options for him that might help. You know, if he's sitting on a capsule chair, or what's my chair called? The pill chair. The pill chair, he's got to constantly be moving his body and his core to keep things in place. And that actually may help to kind of settle some of those other areas as well. Because right now, he's getting it wherever he can. If you guys could see the video, I'm surprised he weighs the weight he weighs, because he's burning off like 1 million calories a minute. He's so out of it. So, you know, all over the place. Not out of it, but all over the place. So I would probably go proprioceptive second after that. But figure out what's going on with that visual just by putting some things in front of him. Okay. So we talk about this picture of your child and how do you know, and what would that picture look like? And I just talked about we have to prioritize. And I kind of looked at that as to how it was impacting. But we like to use this prioritizing problem behaviors checklist. It's actually from the 90s. It's been adapted. But this is also a way that you can determine some ways to prioritize. So the first question is, does the behavior threaten the life of the individual? Does the behavior threaten the physical well-being of the individual? I keep looking over there to see if there's any yeses on these.
Well, pica, but it sounds like not.
No.
But
The pica.
pica, whatever. I say pica. You say. I cracked myself up.
And now we're losing Christy.
It's not hard.
Does the behavior interfere with the educational progress of the student, of the individual? That's kind of where I went initially with yours. So that's a big yes. Does the behavior result in destruction or damage to materials? The crayon, you know, we can get those. We can make art out of them at a later date, right, when they're all broken. Does the behavior become more serious if there's no intervention present? And then I might have to, does he elevate? Okay. And then does the behavior interfere with the social acceptance by others in society? So, I mean, he's got probably 3 or 4 yeses there. And really, they're almost all pointing probably toward the proprioceptive. There's more yeses, but you've got to get the visual intact. So I still think if we look at these prioritizing problem behaviors, that we're still landing on those 2. Okay.
So this is a great checklist for you guys to keep in mind, not only when you're trying to decide which sensory dysfunction are you going to address first, but also when you're just looking across a child, behavior, sensory, everything, that this is one of those checklists that we just really like, because sometimes you're the teacher that can't stand the constant movement. So that seems like that should be the thing that you want to deal with, right? It's teacher tolerance issue. It's not actually a priority. So sometimes this helps us take our own sensory issues out of it. Like if you're the person that can't stand the wet shirt and you've got the shirt chewer, this seems like the worst behavior in the world. But it's because you have some sensory issues, right?
It's not threatening the life of the individual, right? And it's probably not getting in the way of education. It's just probably not even a question on there. It's just gross.
Socially acceptable. It's not socially acceptable.
Not
That's the
socially
bottom line.
acceptable. We have 1 yes.
1.
So if you use this checklist, anytime you say yes, give it 1 point, right? So that's how you can figure out. If it's a no, it's a 0. So I would say on yours, you're probably looking at like 3 points under proprioceptive, maybe. Okay? So use that list. You do have, if you were going to rate looking at your child, the picture of your child in the different areas, how would you rate the child on that scale? So if you could take even 2 minutes to run down, what area are you guys most concerned with up here up front?
Okay, so go through those behaviors that you've listed and look at the prioritization questions and decide which ones, 1 or 2 areas that you're the most concerned about. Okay, yes, I will read them.
Oh,
The
sorry.
top one says, does the behavior threaten the life of the individual? The second one, does the behavior threaten the physical well-being of the individual? Does the behavior threaten the physical well-being of others? Does the behavior interfere with the educational progress of the individual? Does the behavior interfere with the educational progress of others in the setting? Does the behavior result in destruction or damage to materials? Does the behavior become more serious if there is no intervention at the present? And does the behavior interfere with social acceptance by others in society?
Been doing it all along. Okay. Christy and I have walked around and looked, Christy and I have walked around and looked at, you guys have some complex kids. 8 out of 8. Wow. Wow. Tactile. 5 out of 8 for visual. Yeah, you guys, some of you have your hands full. We have an 8 out of 8 kid here. So high pain tolerance, likes pressure, prone to self-injury, temperature sensitivity, self-stimulation, touches objects or people, gloves, hair, discomfort with clothing, not tight enough, seatbelt, shoes, likes them all off.
Never tight enough.
Oh, never tight
Never
enough.
tight enough.
Wow. So he needs a ton of
That's why we
input.
can't use like compression vests and stuff
Mhm.
like that because they are never tight enough. It becomes a source of behavior then.
Okay. All right. So, go ahead.
Did we have another comment?
No,
No, okay.
I think we got it. She's got her hands full. Was there another comment in the back? No? Okay. So, we talked a little bit as we walked through this one over here. What do? Now, you guys have definitely observed all these behaviors. So, your observation is intact, but understanding whether or not it's hyper or hypo can be difficult. Now, I would say he is definitely hypo tactile. So you're going to have to focus your interventions on how do you provide the input that the child needs in a safe way. When the child doesn't get these needs met, do they escalate or not? Yes. Yes? Okay. How often are you engaging in sensory activities in your classrooms?
All day.
All day. So you are trying to regulate this child all day long?
Preventative and as a remedy.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
sensory breaks built into the schedule, and when we recognize that there's something coming, we'll give a break, or she does sometimes request a break.
Okay, so she just said there's sensory time built into the schedule automatically. However, through observation, you can see when she's starting to escalate, and then you intervene.
How often are those sensory breaks scheduled in her day? That's okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I just have to think about her visual schedule.
Right, yeah.
Often. She gets at least 2 before lunch, 2 or 3 before lunch, and 2 or 3 after lunch. And then some of what is built into our program, like part of the fine motor station, is sensory activity.
Sure,
She
sure.
also has a token economy where she can work for
Sensory.
things like the putty that she likes to use, or she works to play the piano. And that's on one of our sections for auditory. She likes the low tone, so she repeatedly plays the same tone on the piano.
Gotcha. So for a child like that, with your sensory breaks, what are you doing? Like, because I would probably make a child sandwich, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, put them between 2 bean bags, 2 mats, apply pressure.
It's difficult to have her do that because then she begins to self-stimulate or masturbate. So we can't have her on her stomach, or we can't give her like weighted vests, weighted blanket, weighted anything, because it just gets placed in places. And then we have another behavior.
Okay.
But I think, and we'll just call out the elephant in the room here, that's all related to hypo. That's all a hypotactile thing. And so I would try to make a kid sandwich and get the arms out. So that because it's all hypo. She's going there because she's hypo everywhere, right? And so she is seeking tactile input. So if you guys could be creative and those arms, she's strong and she's big and she's motivated. Highly motivated. But, you may have to be really creative, but she's needing deep, deep muscle input for sure.
Has anybody done like a swimsuit on her?
We just yes.
Okay.
The swimsuit was to keep clothes on.
Okay.
We just started actually asking if the parent could put her in like bike shorts, Under Armour, the compression clothing.
Yeah.
And one size too small, so that it was
Yeah.
really tight.
Right.
So that we're seeing, we actually asked her to change out to like boys boxer briefs, because it would be tighter on her legs rather than regular briefs. Things like that.
Okay.
I wouldn't agree with that. Being a guy wasn't agree.
Well, one size too small.
You.
You're the only one who can give input here, so.
I think the bike shorts, I do like I said, the swimsuit, so there's a little bit more difficult access. I would make sure that the child always had some sort of a belt on, so there's less access. But I would build in as much, even things like the, backwards bear hug.
Pushing,
When you're standing
joint
behind,
compression.
if you're standing there working with her, doing all of this
what we do.
stuff to provide that. Eventually, obviously, we would like her to provide it herself, but not in the manner that she's doing it. But how old is she?
7.
Okay, so it's going to take a while to work on this one. The thing is, with the sensory systems, they evolve. We have our person in the back who likes sticky things less now, but sometimes they get better, okay? So they continue to kind of grow. So the best thing to do when you're working in something like this, is there a time of the day that she's engaging in that more? Is it nonstop? What are some of the things that are occurring before? Okay, and then is she the one that was also seeking eye contact prior to doing it?
Yep.
So it could be also attention seeking. Yeah, we got to hear that at lunch.
You're welcome.
Yes.
No, thank you.
You also make a really good point of when does she not do it?
Yeah.
And pay attention to that.
So just a few things, yeah, but you have a lot to work. And it places her in danger in the future, obviously, as she gets older. So I'd like to say that anything that you put in place, and we can never say this enough. I walked by and I said, I like the idea of the stuffed animals or the teddy bears for the person who likes soft things, but I will say it's great for a 6-year-old. It's not so great for an 18-year-old. So anytime we're thinking of these interventions that we're using, we're going to have to think, okay, when the child is 21, is that going to be an appropriate intervention? Okay? So just a few things to think about. Or if I'm doing the blanket and the stuffed animal right now and it's working very well, right? What can I graduate that to that might be different in the future? Okay, so is it some sort of a band that I can put on my wrist that maybe won't stand out? I mean, we were just talking about the sensory thing. Who has one of these on their wrist? Okay. I literally got on the plane and looked at Christy and I said, I forgot my rubber band. Right? I don't know that I put my hair up once while we were in San Antonio, but I had to have this on. And I don't know, I haven't even played with it once today. But just think about what that can go to next. But I mean, I think we all have things like this, right? That it doesn't stand out. So can the child touch something that's maybe thicker, or my girls have the ties that are kind of silky. Can that go on the wrist so that something is to touch later? So just always be thinking about how it can become appropriate kind of in that social world and not make the child stand out or the young adult stand out in the future. Okay, you also have to know you have to have reinforcement, and every time that you are putting an intervention in place, you've got to have something the child really wants, okay? There's a big difference between liking something and working for something. So if I'm going to look at this child, since she also tries to gain your attention, I'm thinking attention is probably a big reinforcer for her at times. Do a preference assessment. Figure out what's going to work. Figure out things that aren't going to work. Get those out of your toolbox. Who has a child that thinks that they have nothing that they will work for? You guys do? Okay. What do you think?
I think they haven't found their alpha omega yet.
Okay.
That's what that means in Stacy world.
Yes. So have you tried everything? Do you feel like you've tried everything? Seems like it. Have you gone back to primary levels, the food levels?
Is this a white?
Being stubborn? Okay.
Is this a white food eater? You got see people laugh. You all know white food eater. Yeah. Those are your hypersensitive oral kids, by the way.
Reduce play skills, so play isn't very engaging. Food is a give or take kind of situation.
Is the child medicated? I'm going to ask that question because sometimes Down syndrome? Down syndrome, deaf, first grader. Okay. So toys or not, what about videos?
Videos is, okay, so what we started to do is videotaping her working, because then maybe she can see herself working, and once in a while that would work.
So once in a while videotape, it's a videotape of her working. Well, what about, I don't know the children's shows. My children are 20 and 22 now. Borders, you have little kids.
What? I'm sorry. Yes, I was listening. What's a show? A show for what grade?
First grade.
First grade? I'm sorry. I was delayed. I was reliant on the interpreter for a minute. I'm sorry. First grade shows. I know. Regulate me, please.
TV and technology is not that exciting for her.
It's not.
A lot of times she likes like the me moves. They're called me moves, and it's like on the screen, and they copy the movements that the person is doing.
Yes.
She likes that for a good like 15 seconds, and then decides to just hate it a lot.
No shows, no TV that she likes.
Can't figure out anything.
What does she do given free time?
Clean. She loves to clean. I was
That's
just
a
like, yeah.
reinforcer. I mean, that's one of the things. If you tried, sit back and watch that kid.
And she will.
She likes to clean.
Clean.
And
Cleaning.
we've used cleaning as a reinforcer. So she has a star chart. She gets to wipe down the tables, everything, and again, it's hit or miss, and mostly a miss.
And mostly.
So I'm wondering if cleaning can't go in between each of your activities on her visual schedule. Just little tasks. You know, get the Clorox wipe, hit that desk. How many desks do you have in your room or tables?
4 desks, like 3 tables.
Oh, there you
Yeah,
go.
I mean, she loves. I feel bad. Like people walk by the room and she's like wiping down the tables. I'm like, I swear she wants to do this.
It's child labor.
Is she an organizer too? Like books, if they're out of order, does she like to sort things?
I think she's more of a caregiver. Like, you know, maybe a dolly, if she could take care of a dolly, maybe. Like, she's a caregiver. Like, she wants to be like a mom when she grows up.
We've had other kids that are cleaners who also, like, if you mess up the bookshelf, then they'll put it back in order.
Yeah,
Like
no.
to do that.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That
But
makes
you could
sense,
try
though.
it.
I could try it.
You could.
Heavy work?
If she's like organizing the bookshelf, she's getting like
That's true.
organizing and some heavy work at the same time.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to say you can use sensory for your reinforcers. Now, I know we always worry about that a little bit, but I would definitely use sensory for reinforcers. And it's fine as long as you know kind of the length of time that the child can engage with the sensory item before they get possibly overstimulated, right? Before they're like not thinking anymore. They're having too much fun with it, all right? So just think about how their sensory preferences could actually be used as reinforcers. So I don't have you guys kind of destroyed your signs. That's okay. Okay, never mind. Make sure that you, whatever you find, she might get tired of cleaning. So make sure that you've got some rotation things. We always say that you've got to take it out of rotation. It's a reinforcer, not an addiction, right? So it's not like Diet Coke or coffee where you have to have it every day and to keep you, get you up and moving. It's something that I like it right now, but I can become easily satiated on it. So make sure that you're constantly rotating whatever reinforcer that you're using. And as Christy said, you can ask the student, you can observe the student. One of the best ways to learn about a student is to just sit back and watch them. And you might say, well, wait a minute, but we're not engaged in the curriculum, we're not doing that. It doesn't matter. If you don't know what the reinforcer is, you're probably not going to get them to do very much work to begin with. So if you have to spend, a couple of days just watching them navigate the environment and seeing what they go to and interacting with them in those areas, do that because your reward or the payoff is so much bigger in the end if you know what those items are.
To what extent would you recommend giving them sensory breaks between curriculum and instruction versus having them squeeze something while they're trying to pay attention to you when you're teaching them? How do you know when to separate that as the reward, and how do you know when to let them do it the whole day, or have it be something that helps them focus during an instruction?
Right. if it's helping them focus during instruction to sit on a ball chair or to sit on a pill chair or something like that, that it's with them at all times, right? Because they're getting the input, they're getting what they need. The ball, what kind of input are they looking for? Because okay, so this is one thing that really, I'm not saying you guys are doing this, but one thing that bothers me is that people give kids fidgets when that is not really the purpose of why they're engaging in the sensory behavior. Do you know what I mean? So it's just like the function of the behavior. Whatever replacement you're providing, it has to provide the same type of sensory input. So, you know, I'll have people all the time like, well, they need a fidget, they need this, they need that. And I'm like, just tell me what observation lends to a fidget, right?
So I can add something if you want about a
Perfect.
couple examples. I have a couple students who are just always falling out of their chair, touching everything, and I think of giving them a fidget as like a way to direct their energy to maybe help them focus a little bit better. And then we see a student together who he shuts down pretty easily and he becomes really kind of non-responsive, and he has autism.
And he perks up when he has that?
Well, it's either that or he's he has those kind of two modes, and we sometimes give him fidgets, and it's pretty distracting.
Yeah, and I'm surprised they're not whipping by your ear pretty fast, right? When you say those things to me, I'm thinking we're probably looking at some proprioceptive and possibly some vestibular components. So if you have those wiggly guys like that, if you can get them out on a swing, if you've got a swing in your room, if you have a little mini tramp, something that they can use to kind of get that out of their system, they might sit and focus a little bit better than having a fidget in their hand. So think about that movement, what they're doing, and then try to match that intervention to what it is. Okay? So I would say fidgets are good for kind of tactile people. You know, we have these one balls that you can sit and it's like I don't even know how to describe it. You know, you can pull the little rubbery things out. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? What? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It looks like a puffer fish with all these long little rubber bands on it. They like to snap them, yeah. So, I mean, there are kids that like to engage like that, but sometimes things like that actually interfere. But try to figure out if they're falling out of the chair, moving all over the place, go vestibular, go proprioceptive, try things out, because that's what you have to do. One thing is not, the first thing you try is not going to work, guaranteed.
I also think there are two things that I would say about that question. First of all, your OT is your best friend. Your OT is the person that's going to help do an evaluation to see, she is your best friend. She's right behind you. She's your best friend. That person is going to help establish how much needs to go in to arouse, to get those states where they need to be, and can set up a sensory diet for your student. We actually have heard, bizarrely enough, OTs or teachers tell us, well, we don't do sensory diets. That student needs to learn to regulate himself. And I'm like, great, that's never going to work. Okay, thank you. So sensory diet, first of all, I think an OT has to be a part of that conversation about how often your student needs to have some input. The other thing is, your student is going to show you if they're not getting enough. It's going to turn into behavior. It's going to turn into sensory seeking to say, well, he's doing this and this and this, and then we give a sensory break. That's why I asked the timing for sensory break, because your students, if this one is as hypo-tactile as she appears to be, then she probably needs to be on an if-then. 1-to-1. One activity, input. One activity, input. One activity, input. Otherwise, you are going to spend all day long combating it. And And if you just give her what she needs, you might be able to extend to 2 and then input and 2 and then input. And here's the other thing. The best and most important thing I can tell you about sensory input is to stay flexible, just like you are for task calendars and for those task, what do you call those things with like the pennies on them and they have to do 2 before they get their reinforcer? Hello, token economy. Hey, my arousal level's a little low. Sorry. Okay, so your token economy, you want to think the same way for sensory input. On a day when I have a sinus infection, I need a little more input in the gustatory, right? Nothing has taste today because my body is different today. So every kid, and we always think physiological first, yes, but that's going to impact every bit of sensory input for your students. They have an ear infection, you can guarantee vestibular is different today, right? And so be flexible and watch your kids because your students will tell you if they're not getting enough. If it used to work to do 3 things, 3 activities before input, and then on Tuesday morning you get in there and you can't even make it halfway through an activity before they're seeking, they need more that day. And so just being flexible with yourself and explaining that to all of the other adults in your world, that's the hardest part sometimes. If you can get that flexibility for thinking sensory first, I think it could work wonders for your students.
Okay. Now, for the last about 10 minutes, what I want you to do is I want you to kind of stand up and look at your picture of your student. It's not an actual picture, but it is a picture. I want you to identify that area, and we're going to kind of move around the room a little bit. And I know that you guys have put some interventions in place already on yours. What I'd like for you guys to do is think. We have a student over here that dislikes surprise touch, is okay with hand under hand, gets hot fast, and senses our air movement, okay? The child is blind, auditorily dislikes auditory bombardment, wears hearing aids in right ear, left ear, no correctable hearing. He's tube fed, but he likes to touch things to his tongue. Uses a vibrating spoon for tastings. Proprioceptive. So you guys are already doing some things for regulation, okay? But I want you to stand up. What is your picture? What are you going to do when you go back? The first thing. I feel like we should just bring her up, right? This little guy over here too, I kept thinking, have you tried the weighted on him in one place? Mm-hmm. Christy and I note that you have some pretty tough kids that you're working with. So remember to start on one area, try things out until you can get some success. You're not going to get a child regulated in a week. You're not going to get a child regulated in 3 months. But if you can lessen some of the impact that it has on how a child is learning in your environment, then I think that you've made great success. Okay? We've talked a few things about interventions. As teams, I want you to really kind of think about where to start. Where should you begin? And then come up with 6 interventions for that one area. And then just test them out and see how they're going to work. And sometimes we don't know, as we said earlier, if it's going to make them, if they're going to have too much access to them, the behavior actually may go up. So you're going to have to do some observation. We were talking about the fact that we have a child back here that likes to make a noise, and the child is deaf and blind, correct? And so, there you are, I couldn't find you. And so we've talked about the possibility of the vibration that the child is getting out of that. So, what would maybe a neck vibrator do to help maybe eliminate that? And at what point, how long can the child wear that before it escalates a behavior? So it's really kind of just trying things out for lengths of time to see and really gauging. Like, keep your eye on the clock so you know how long. It's also about embedding it at appropriate times, knowing when you're going to have a child that's, going to exhibit some of the behaviors that were on that long list that Katie had. It's just knowing how to predict when it's going to happen, because that's when you need to kind of get that sensory component in place. We talked a little bit about a sensory diet, but it's that constant throughout the day. You guys have been regulating all day. We have been regulating all day. And so it's teaching them to regulate because they don't have those internal skills. Okay? And that's that wiring.
Absolutely. So 2 more things before you all break. That's what's it called? QR code. They're teaching me. That QR code brings you to my email. So if you are interested in receiving that email that we talked about at the very beginning of the day, that's going to look at data and research for deaf kids with either diagnosed or suspected autism, please, please, please send me an email, and we will be sure to email you that information when we are ready to start collecting data. And or deafblind, that will go to Christy. Yes, ma'am? They do not have to have a secondary eligibility at all. They can. Yes,
Correct.
yes. It could be suspected autism or characteristics of autism because the team and or the parent have discussed that as a concern or a characteristic that they're seeing. So we definitely want to look at both of those things. So feel free to contact me. That'll also be coming out across the ITHY listserv as well. And I think Sherry was going to send it out. So you all will get it, I think, regardless. But that's good. Second of all, your evaluation sheets for today's session are 2-sided. So don't forget to fill out the second side. And thank you all for your attention
Yes,
and
thank you.
regulation. It was fabulous. And we will see you at ITHY. Stacy and I will be there, so we'll see you then.